All right, we are right back into it, continuing with Unit 7, the global conflict after 1900, today with the causes of World War I and the conduct of World War I. We're going to start off with this governance theme, and you need to understand with regard to the causes of World War I, how the role of these government decisions are going to contribute to this war. Imperialist expansion and the competition for resources, territorial and regional conflicts that are going to be brewing, a flawed alliance system, intense nationalism. A combination of all these factors are going to lead us to the biggest global conflict that the world has seen. Now, we want to start off talking about militarism, and this is that belief that a nation should maintain a strong military, and that reflects the strength of the nation itself. And if you build a big military, you should be prepared to use it. In the decades before the war, the great powers of Europe, we're talking Britain and France and Germany, are pouring vast resources into growing their militaries. And this is aided by the rise of industrial production through the Industrial Revolution. We see a naval arms race developing between countries like Britain and Germany, and we also see conscription of soldiers. Growing armies to the sizes of hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And you can now equip them because of the Industrial Revolution. We're also going to talk about the alliance system in the years before World War I. Various alliances are forming as nations are concerned that a wider war might break out, and you can't really win a big war like this just on your own. So we see the Entente powers. This is France and Russia, later Britain. Just remember that entente is a French word basically meaning an agreement, and so France is going to be in there. And they've got Russia, so you've got France and Russia on either side of Germany. This becomes quite threatening to the German nation, who themselves will have an alliance with Austria-Hungary and Italy, known as the Triple Alliance. Once the war begins, we're going to refer to the Entente powers often just as the Allies, and as the Triple Alliance will become the Central Powers. One note, Italy, a country in the Triple Alliance, is going to bail on that alliance and ultimately join the Entente powers, while the Ottoman Empire will join the Central Powers. Should also be familiar with the role of imperialism. This is that quest for a nation to expand its empire through the conquest of new territories. The search for new lands will often result in conflicts between imperial powers, particularly in Africa, where France and Germany, for example, would run into each other over the colony of Morocco. Nationalism. Two definitions of nationalism to be familiar with. One, that pride in one's nation and the belief in national supremacy felt by people with common national heritage, like Germans or Frenchmen or English. And then two, the desire of people to have a break from empires that are controlling them, to have a nation of their own. These ideologies will contribute to imperial competitions, militarism, and ultimately the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. So let's talk about this assassination and how it leads to World War I. On July 28th, 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he's the number 2 in Austria, the next guy to be emperor. He's assassinated by a Serbian nationalist group that did not want to have Austria-Hungary controlling a large number of Serbs in their territory. Austria, after this assassination, is going to reach out to Germany to see if they could get some assistance, just in case Russia got a little helpful with its ally in Serbia. Germany responds with what they call the blank check. This is basically an Austria, you do whatever you need to do, we've got your back. Austria then will launch an attack on Serbia on July 28th, 1914. Following that, Russia mobilized their armies in response to that attack on its ally of Serbia. Germany then, after Russia mobilizes, will begin their Schlieffen Plan. This is the German plan to hopefully avoid fighting a two-front war, where they'll attack France through neutral Belgium, defeat them, and then send all their soldiers across to the east to now fight the invading Russians. So Germany launches their Schlieffen Plan. This leads Britain to declare war on Germany following the invasion of neutral Belgium, with whom Britain had a treaty with. So now we've got World War I. And we now get into the actual fighting of this war. And what you need to know here is that World War I is the first total war, where governments are going to mobilize their entire population for the purpose of waging war. We see new military technologies that will lead to an increase in wartime casualties to levels the world had never seen before. And World War I will become a truly global war as nations beyond Europe will join the effort and provide soldiers, labor, and supplies. So let's take a look at some of the technology of the war. New technological developments during the war will bring tremendous casualties to all nations in this fight. We've got trench warfare on the Western Front as German and French and British soldiers are really at a stalemate, so they just dig in to find some safety in the ground. This is largely forced by the development of the machine gun, an incredibly effective defensive weapon that made it hard for enemy soldiers to advance. We also see the use of poison gases, submarines on the open seas, airplanes during World War I, and the development of tanks during the war. Now, this war is a total war where a nation's military and their domestic population is going to be mobilized to support the war effort. Joining soldiers on the front lines, millions of civilians will be working in factories back home to provide the supplies of the war effort. We'll also see colonial subjects and workers from places like China or India that are brought to the war front to make up for labor shortages for nations at war. Economies are going to be redirected towards wartime production, and governments will place production quotas, price controls, wage controls, and consumer goods will be rationed out to the public. So this is going to result in governments taking far bigger roles in their economy. Governments will also produce a lot of propaganda during the war effort to try to influence the attitudes and opinions of their public. This propaganda included recruitment drives in warring nations to encourage people to join the military, also encouragement to purchase war bonds that could help finance the war effort. This propaganda often included emotional and sometimes misleading information to try to grow the hatred of the enemy. And here you see a very, there it is, there it is, a very famous propaganda piece coming from the Americans depicting Germany as like a King Kong figure to dehumanize the German state. World War I is absolutely a global war. This fight is going to be fought beyond European fronts. In the Middle East, we're going to see British forces joining with Arabs to battle the Ottoman Empire. In Africa, German colonies are going to be attacked by Allied powers. In the Pacific, Japan will attack some Pacific holdings of the Germans. And hundreds of thousands of colonial subjects will be forced to join the war effort, both in Europe and at home. So what do we want to take out of all of this conversation? World War I begins due to a combination of long-term and short-term causes: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism, and the political assassination of Franz Ferdinand. New technologies are going to increase the carnage of the war for both soldiers and civilians, making World War I a total war where the entire populace is mobilized for the war effort, along with colonial subjects who are forced to support their controlling nation's war in Europe. We'll talk to you next time.